Yep. Get in there, yeah. It's not on.
We're doing so good.
Okay, I'd like to call the August 19th, 2026 meeting of the Finance Committee to order. And I think we have some other boards here. My co-chair has access to the
Select
Zoom.
You have to roll call to order.
Right, no, we are gonna do that. I'm just noting that we're gonna do a few calls to order, but, and then we'll get to the agenda. So first for the Finance Committee, I'll do remotely. I think it's just, is it just Ed? Ed?
Here.
And then I'll go around the room. Andrew?
Yeah.
Joe Carnahan?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
Emily?
Here.
Chris?
Here.
And Mary Ann here. Okay, and do we have a quorum of the select board?
Yep. Melissa's on.
So Melissa, you can call the select board to order?
Thank you, Marianne. I'll call the select board to order. Chris Haley,
Here.
Karen Herrick. Here. And Melissa Murphy here. I don't think anyone else is on, correct?
No, and there's no one in the room. And I don't think we have any school committee quorum?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so tonight will be a modest agenda, but there's probably one main discussion item. We will start with, public comment. I don't know, it may be just someone who's on the call now. I don't see anyone in the room. Some liaison reports. We have an override discussion, and I have a memo in the packet summarizing the select board's recent discussion on the phased-in override. And select board members, if you're on, if I did not fully accurately state your position or you've modified it, when we get to that discussion, feel free to supplement it, because you guys had a really good discussion. I listened to it, and it gave us a lot to think about. So we have the option, if we want, to vote on if we like any of the phased-in override recommendations, or we have a different proposal, or we favor none of them. And I think a lot of us have been in a few override forums. We can discuss the public feedback that we've received. Next, there's a free cash usage policy discussion, and I think, was it the town manager had something on that?
I think so.
Yes, because I don't have materials on that. We have a page in the packet with liaison assignments, always fun, and if anyone wants to try anything new, this is the time. We can go over future agendas. I know a topic came up during the audit committee meeting that we can discuss. And approval of prior meeting minutes, and because our last meeting ran so long, we do have a lot of minutes. So we'll have to get through those. So I'll start with, I guess, public comment. There's nobody in the room. Jackie, is there anyone with their hand up online? Or any board members?
It's online.
Okay. So next, we can move on to liaison reports. Does anyone want to start? Online or in person? Go ahead, Mark.
So we had the audit committee meeting. Marianne was there with myself on Monday the 10th. So the auditors, was a clean audit and no real significant findings. We do, every time we have a meeting, we ask the auditors to look into particular areas. So we talked about, and it's usually something where departments getting cash in to just look at their controls. And so we talked about Public Works, which collects the fees for the compost center. So,
Yeah, like any cash operations.
yeah. So that was the main focus. A little bit of discussion on, should they look at the clerk too, so. But that was it.
Yeah, I mean, just to supplement that, because I know Ms. Herrick is online and she would bring it up if we didn't do it. A couple of audit members brought up the idea of, should we consider an audit of the Burbank Ice Arena? And I did go look at the Burbank lease that was in the March 10th, 2026 select board packet. And it does provide that the town at its own expense could audit the ice arena. So what I'm not gonna go further into that. We can have that come up in future agendas, because I think we wanna discuss the need and the cost and the timing for something like that, and also to figure out what we've received so far, so.
Well, there is an independent audit firm that audits the Burbank Ice Authority, so that would be above and beyond, so.
Right, I mean, we may want to start with, that'll be a future agenda topic
Yeah.
anyway, that's not on our agenda, but that was the other thing from audit committee. Any other liaison reports? Anyone?
Mary, I can talk about Killam, the Killam.
Excellent, yeah, thanks, Ed.
The Killam School Building Committee, we met on Monday. Pretty efficient meeting as Carla usually runs. This actually went a little bit longer. Really good news for the town. I think we've, kind of talked about this a little bit. The bid for the contractor came back, and I think it's already been, kind of communicated, but that was roughly $25 million under what we had appropriated and authorized by town meeting and voted on by the town. So on Monday, what the MSBA, kind of requires us, once the bid is, the bids are finalized and accepted, that we have to, there's a form that we have to fill out that kind of has them kind of redo the math as far as that goes. And so one of the things that we had to do was determine how much of that 25 million do we turn back, back to the, kind of back to the town. And so the discussion that we ended up having was, what would be an appropriate number to come back, so that we had some, leftover bid contingency for anything that would be unforeseen. And a lot of the permanent building committee members kind of, were kind of really instrumental in kind of talking through the things that we'd want to be able to have a bid contingency for, so that we wouldn't have to go back to the town if anything unforeseen came up. So at the end of the day, we're turning back approximately 15 million, which is about like 60% of the competitive bid. We're going to keep $10 million as a bid contingency. If we don't use it, and we don't anticipate that we're going to need to use it, but if we don't use it, then that would kind of go back to Sharon, and we wouldn't have to. And we wouldn't borrow for it, obviously, but it just kind of left us with, kind of a lot of, a good position to be in, and keeping the, kind of the taxpayer in mind too. Not that there's much that we could that could be done with it otherwise. The only other item that was on there is that there is an official groundbreaking. It's I think it's Friday the 18th. I might have my date wrong, but
September,
it is correct, the 18th. Good guess. Thanks. Thanks. Thank Mrs. Wellman for that. Ms. Wellman for that. We've had a running joke as far as we're going to use formalities, her and I, from now on. But yeah, so we have an official groundbreaking in September, and so that really exciting. I know there's been a lot of kind of prep work, site work that's being done for folks that have been down there. It's definitely taking shape, and so I know there's a lot of folks excited, for kind of for next steps.
Ed, Mark had a question for you.
Sure, go ahead.
So the 25 million, does any of that go back to the state?
Somebody just said
Great question.
15.
Great question. But that's what's really interesting about that is very small amount, because everything, the way that the reimbursement from the MSBA works. It's based on a certain, kind of dollar amount per square footage. And we were over that. So when the bid came back, our project manager kind of showed us their calculations that they do, because it's something that's routine that they do. The amount that gets, out of that, 25 or whatever the amount was, it's like maybe at most like $1,000 that goes back to MSBA. So the rest of it goes to the town. And those were all estimates. We don't have the final number yet. He has to, to kind of go through the process in the calculator. But in the end, the way that, because of where we were going to be at as far as what we borrowed and the cost of this of it, the fact that the bid came in lower directly benefits the town. It's a great question.
Ed, just one follow-up from me, because I had heard
Sure.
about this from Carla. And so is there the risk, and I know it might be a remote risk, that if we needed more contingency than we're holding back, that we would have to have, if something unforeseen happened, we would have to go back to the voters? Because
Well, I mean,
if it went beyond the contingency we're holding back.
Yeah, we had a really robust conversation. It's a great question, Mary Ann. Thanks for asking that. We had a really robust conversation about that piece of it. Within the bid itself, the overall 130 million that was originally, voted on and approved, there was already some contingencies built into that. There's approximately like $6 million in contingencies that are already kind of baked into the 75 that's in there. And so the conversation that we had was, okay, well, how much from a bid contingency do you want to still leave behind? And so that's how we decided on and voted on keeping 10. But specifically to your question, one of the things that we kind of talked through was, if we were ever in that position, obviously we would exhaust the contingencies that we have. But I think that we would also start to make some tougher decisions about what we would do.
I'm coming.
Because so what we would do, that wasn't for me, right? Was that somebody else that was talking?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Sorry. And so we talked about it. The last thing that we want to be able to do is have to go back to the voters. And so through that checklist, we would actually go through, kind of the bid contingency, the contingencies that are already in there, and then make changes so that, and make decisions on, okay, well, maybe we don't need X, Y, or Z, so that we are, kind of managing it so that it doesn't go back, so that we don't go back to the voters. But that was the real reason for probably keeping a little bit more than, that I think that we had a good discussion about it, but I think that was the main thing.
Okay, so I know Karen Herrick in the audience has her hand up, but I just wanted to check with our board, were there any more liaison reports that anyone wanted to give? We're going to move on to more of the meeting, but Karen, did you have a question on one of the liaison reports or something?
Actually, as a liaison, I was raising my hand.
Liaison from the select board, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but that's okay. I'm happy to go after the finance committee members. Great
Well,
to see you.
everyone's gone, I think. Nobody has anything, so go ahead.
Okay, great. We had a fabulous audit committee meeting. We have a new audit partner. We haven't had one in a couple of years. And they explained that they were incredibly backlogged and that this won't be happening in the future. We should be able to have an audit meeting every year. And Mary Ann can confirm. We have a very enthusiastic team, and no red flags were raised. And we were able to, it was a very timely meeting because y'all got notification, from Sharon, I believe, about, an MMA, bond ratings webinar, which I highly
I
recommend.
saw that, yeah.
Yeah, it touches upon, so one of the things is coordinating your audit with the timing of your borrowing and so many other things that we've all been talking about. And I came away from it thinking that, okay, we are doing all the right things, and it was incredibly educational. It was just an hour. It wasn't very long. So I forwarded that to you all. And then, and thank you, Ed, for that update. That's really great news. I just wanted to say to the finance committee, so as a single select board member, and your liaison, I appreciate that this is an advisory committee to town meeting, and I also appreciate all of the collaboration that you're willing to do with the select board and the school committee in terms of like, what are the right decisions to make for the community. So I always appreciate that collaboration. I feel like personally there was some pushback that we didn't automatically, as a select board, adopt your recommendation for the override numbers for the warrant. And I just want to reassure you that I don't disregard your collaboration and your input, and that'll go for the same tonight. The overrides phase in. I'd say from my perspective, Marianne, your summary looks great. I feel like it's a little early to commit to that. I'd prefer to give Jane and Sharon more time to see how the cash regeneration works and how our certified cash looks. And the select board, I believe, is going to take it up in September. I just think it's a little early, but again, I appreciate you guys even taking up the topic and helping work through this.
We put it on the agenda because at one of your meetings, I think somebody, either on the select board or the town manager, suggested that we take a vote or make a recommendation, and that's leading right into our next thing. In terms of adopting our suggestions, I'm not going to try to speak for the whole board, but they're just suggestions, and I think we all, you saw we gave it a lot of debate, and the school committee kind of even went in a further direction. And you know what? In November, the voters are going to tell you, and that's really what it's going to go. And I think
100%.
all of this is going to be, there's a lot about the messaging, whether it's the phasing of the override or whether there were, maybe different amounts would confuse voters. But that's all, really, that's all. What we're doing tonight is not going to be binding. So
I give you permission to change your mind later. Give us another. How's that? Thank you.
Yep. And does anyone have any further response to Ms. Herrick and the select board about our vote or her comments? Or are we ready to move on? Okay. Did you have something, Andrew? No. Okay. Okay. So next up on the agenda, speaking of that, is I realize, I'm sorry, it was yesterday that I could finally get to this. Just an introduction to the topic of spreading in the impact of the override. I think we had talked about it. The select board had a fairly robust discussion. And Jack, if you could slide to the table, I mean, the slide, it'll be in color, I think, in what you have. So hopefully you guys have all seen this. I think this is really what we would be considering. And the select board, had their own views on what, not only would we want to do this, how would we communicate it. One of the things that came out to me, which I appreciated, she's not on the call, I think, what Karen Rose Gillis said, look, we need the full $6.5 million for the budget that we're putting forth. And so phasing it in is not really artificial, but it's going to still require it's still going to require free cash to bring it up to the structural deficit, right, of the 9.8. But the other select board members, I were pretty conscious that the way the Killam recal debt is going to be structured, that there's going to be a bigger tranche in the year 2, and we were trying to, neutralize the impact for voters. So I guess I tried to list pros and cons. To me, I can give my opinion later, but I guess just as with the rest of the override, I think the biggest con is messaging and getting the public to understand, because someone, Sharon or Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we would be we can't change the language in the ballot question. So the voters are not gonna understand. The voters, you can.
That would be difficult. I mean, it definitely would have to be part of our conversations because the language would not change on the vote. I would just need to know when I set the tax rate to leave a certain amount of money on the table as excess capacity. So educating them on how that would be done and getting them to understand that would be part of those sessions that we have about the override if we decided to go with phasing in.
And the hard thing is, we've had a couple of sessions where phasing in wasn't discussed. And then if suddenly phasing in is discussed and the later override sessions talk about it, people are gonna say, at least I would say that, hey, I listened to a session in August and you said one thing and now it's something different in October. So I think that's a challenge. I'd like to open it up for discussion with the group though. Anyone wanna start? Joe?
Just a clarification question to make sure we're all on the same page about the second tranche of Killam debt. So at our previous meetings, what I took away, correctly or otherwise, and this is where you can correct me, was that more than half of what we're going to need to borrow for Killam and Recal was borrowed in FY27, or rather was borrowed in FY26. So it's why my tax bill went up so much, that we had the possibility of borrowing the second tranche in year 3, not year 2, and the override would land. The first year of the override would be year 2 of the sort of Killam timeframe. Mm-hmm. Is that so? The second tranche would be smaller and in year 3.
Yeah, so I borrowed about $50 million for Killam and $20 million for Recal, which was more than 60%. So the town's portion of that $130 million that was originally estimated for Killam was about $85 million. So we have a debt authorization out there still for $35 million for Killam. I do not think we're going to get anywhere close to $35 million given the savings that we're seeing with the general contractor's bid. We would probably end up borrowing maybe $17 or $18 million to finish the project. So clearly that would be a much smaller borrowing than what the taxpayers saw in this year's bill. But still significant, not a small amount, honestly, but still a lot less than what they saw in fiscal 27. And we borrowed $20 million out of a $27.9 million project for Recal, and that one's coming in. I don't recall how much under budget that one is, but again, smaller amounts are going to be borrowed for both projects on that second tranche. And the cash flow for Killam is showing right now, and we're still looking at the cash flows and trying to time out borrowings, that I probably won't have to borrow any additional funding until October of 2027, given all the savings that we have. And so that first borrowing very likely will be a short-term borrowing for a year and would have at least one interest payment, probably no principal payment, because then we would borrow permanently. We're just trying to line up the two projects and make sure that the timeline makes sense for both projects to determine that borrowing. But be clear that there is another tranche of debt. It is going to come and hit the tax bills more than likely in 2029. If we do have interest payments in fiscal 28, it would be probably one, possibly two interest payments. But we're trying to do everything we can to structure it so minimal amounts are hitting in 28. So the year of the override is just pretty much the override. That's what the goal is. Who knows if that timing will work out the way we hope. And then fiscal 29 would be when you'd see that actual second tranche of debt hit. That's the hope.
Okay, I see Ed Ross has his hand up. Ed, go ahead.
Thanks, Mary Ann. I appreciate it. Sharon, just on that point, and I don't know if you or Jane know this, and this gets back to Mary Ann's point around messaging, but just about that last thing that you were talking about, do you know how common it is for towns to do what you're doing for the borrowing, like breaking it up into bands and tranches? And again, I know that, and we know it because we're so close, that you're doing it because you're really looking out for the taxpayer and the town as far as how to be able to do that. Do you know if that's more common now, or is it rare? Again, this gets back to the messaging. We know how much you do and how much you care about it, and to the extent that this is rare, I just want to make sure that we can speak to that.
Yes, thanks. That's a good question. So for larger projects like Killam, it's very typical to do at least 2 tranches, if not several tranches of debt to break it up, because you don't want to over borrow. And in this case, we can see why. I mean, this project's coming in $25 million under. You don't want to have $25 million borrowed. Plus, there's also spending timelines that we have to adhere to so that we don't have to pay back arbitrage, which is the interest we earn on the money we're holding while we're building. And so we have to kind of keep up with the spending timeline. So that's part of the reason why you do tranches, but also you don't want to overborrow and be holding money that you need to transfer to another project of similar kind, and especially a building project, because we don't do large-scale building projects that frequently. So it is common to do tranches, and it's also common to do short-term borrowings just until you've got your final number. Sometimes you'll see communities will do short-term borrowings until the project is complete and then do one permanent borrowing. So it's all about comfort for the treasurer who's managing it and what they think is the best given the economic environment, what the interest rates are, and there's a lot of factors that go into it. But in this situation, we are also factoring in the timing of this override and trying to minimize pain to the best of our ability for the taxpayers, because make no mistake, it is less than ideal timing for a need for an override.
Okay, anyone else? I think Joe McDonough?
Yeah, probably a question for Sharon. I'm just trying to understand the exact timing. Like, what's the latest we could go in terms, and I'm not recommending we do this, but in terms of like spreading it out over 2 years, it's when you determine the tax rate, correct?
In terms of spreading the override, are you saying?
Yeah, assuming the override passes, right?
I did
How
2 years because I felt like the smaller override, I could have done longer, but the problem is our structural deficit is so large that for every year that I don't have that piece, I'm putting that piece either in free cash or I'm putting it in cuts. Like, so we're trying to avoid cuts that are going to significantly impact services. And so if I were to try and spread it and do smaller chunks, we would need larger pieces of free cash or cuts to make those budgets
Sure.
work.
No, I understand that, but like, how late in the year could you go? I'm just trying to remember, like, when do you actually set the tax rate?
Oh, we set the tax rate in November. So right after November town meeting, I submit, and we have our tax bills out by
And
December.
then we'd have a better indication of where we were, like any free cash regeneration
I mean,
or any
we'll
other
probably have
surprises.
more. I mean, I'm already looking at free cash, but because the numbers are still moving, I'm still getting invoices in for fiscal '26. So I don't want to quote where we are specifically because I haven't fully done the calculation completely. And then there's other components I think I've spoke about in the past where at June 30th, if you've got grants that are in deficit, you have until September 30th to collect from those, state or federal grants, and then you don't have to hold that free cash. So those can be sizable sometimes at year end. So it could really change how things look. I could tell you, oh yeah, this is the way this is going to be, and then I'm being held a lot of money for a state grant that I thought we were going to get. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I know there might be messaging challenges, but like I'm just thinking like maybe the longer that we wait, like could give us more flexibility. I'm just.
I mean,
throwing that out
I'm
there.
hoping that the number I gave you guys is a conservative number. The expense number, I didn't know enough to be able to I gave a $1 million number. It could be more than that, and it could help our free cash position. But as I said before, at the time, the estimate brought us to only 12% of our net available revenues, and we're really aiming for 15. So even if I'm off $1 million, it's still not going to make a whole lot of difference about we really don't have the access to be throwing in. So it is kind of less than ideal.
All right, thanks.
Andrew, go ahead.
So Sharon, that one million that you mentioned, is that the temporary savings from the delay of the Killam And,
Oh, you mean on the expense side?
yeah, what's the
It-
delay, like, what's the amount of
The-
the
the-
delay?
I'm not understanding what you're referring to.
So if the debt gets delayed in FY '28, okay?
Okay, yeah.
So how much money are we talking about that we're pushing out?
The whole principal payment
Yeah,
would be
so how much
pushed
would
out.
that be? So that will help me a lot to like kind of pick a number there.
It's kind of hard to say because we don't have the second tranche of debt, like how much we'd actually borrow. So we've borrowed about 60% of Killam, and if I was to, if we really were to spend the 130 million, we had 40% more, or $35 million more to borrow, which would have been about another maybe, I want to say like a couple $100 or $300 for each taxpayer in terms of if it was, so I'm just trying to figure out, for me, I do think that the full amount was a good amount, but I can't tell you what it would be for the amount that we're going to borrow because I'm not entirely sure yet. I know that it could be somewhere in that 17 to $20 million for Killam, and it could be less than that. So I could be overquoting you, but there's savings there in terms of how many interest payments I'm going to need in fiscal '28 and not having the principal payment. And that
exactly,
principal
yeah.
payment is going to vary based on how much money I truly need. So I can look it up and give it to you, like my thoughts of what it would be, but it would be an estimate at this point.
Yeah.
Right now, I have it in my debt schedule as the fully loaded second tranche of $35 million.
Do you
And-
remember that value? Because we can discount it, like you borrowed 60%, we can discount that value and try to get what the 40% is.
So we would have been borrowing over 20 years, right?
Yeah, 20 years. I would say it's probably.
It's,
about
we're
that
really
many.
saving the principal
Yeah,
payments,
just
right?
for 1 year, correct.
So about $1.2 million.
1.2, yeah, that's what I saw, about one. So with that in mind, so here's my logic for it, okay? We're trying to smooth out the impact on the tax bill for the taxpayers. So on that screen, there is like 4 options, because we're gonna have FY '20. If it was me, I would go with a full-on first year. However, because we have that gap in FY '28, it leaves us with a pretty good like tactic to go with the option that says year 1 5.5 million, year 2 we do the 1 million, which is exactly the savings that we're gonna get from pushing out the debt, and that kind of smoothes out the impact of the tax bill. That's my personal opinion. I would definitely go with that, considering that we would have paid at least 1 million. We do have that savings. And then the impact on the tax bill is we are paying right now for the first tranche. We have a gap. That gap, the override is going to kick in at 623. And then the following year, we're going to borrow again. And then the impact from the override is going to be only $113. So I think it just smoothes this out a little better. And it helps to know what that temporary savings from the borrowing is. That's my logic for it.
Okay, I think Joe, then Mark, or Mark, okay, okay.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I did have a question for Andrea because I'll be honest, I did not quite understand what you said there. So I understand that the sort of the total tax levy, including debt exclusions, is going to be about $1 million smaller in FY '28 on account of not borrowing.
Yep.
That seems like an argument not to spread out the override rather than an argument to spread out the override by that amount.
Okay. So what I'm trying to do here, okay, is the impact. So if you do the override right now, okay, you're gonna have exactly $736 hitting the taxpayers. What we're trying to do is we're trying to smooth it out, because on top of the $736, next year you're gonna have a gap, and then you're gonna have another swing. You're just trying. So we're trying to smooth out the 3-year swinging of the tax bill. That's the way I see it. We're just trying to levy it a little bit, and the way to do it is on year 1, which is we do if it passes, we do the year one, you pay $623. There is nothing else going on that year because the debt borrowing is delayed. So there is nothing else going on. So you get hit with $600 there. Then the following year, Shane is going to borrow the other 20 million. So you're going to get hit with another $400K plus $100, $500 plus $100 from the second year. So you're still at an increase which is kind of similar to the prior year. You see what I mean? It just smoothes out the swings. That's all.
Maybe this could help. So by doing a ban, I'm avoiding the principal payment for the two. So let's say the full amount for recal is still needed, which I don't think it will be, but I don't know the savings off the top of my head. $7.9 million I need to borrow for them. And then let's say 18 million is needed. I would be saving about $525,000 of principal payments for recal plus almost 1.2 million for Killam. So you're talking about $1.7 million that I'm pushing into the future so that we can have the override land in fiscal 28 and not have those principal payments there with it. And so that's kind of how we're trying to structure it, is to avoid that principal payment, because we pay principal payment once a year and then we pay 2 interest payments. So I might not be able to avoid interest payments, but I will be able to avoid the principal payments on that last tranche and push it into the next year, just to buy us time so that it's less expensive for the resident that in fiscal 28. Because if we decide to go with 1 year for this override, it's a $736 hit all by itself without even this interest payment on the second tranche. Hopefully the savings we're seeing on both might push it out further than October 2027. Maybe I'll only have 1 interest payment in fiscal 28. Maybe we can push it out further because we've borrowed a lot of the money that we need for both projects. But as we move through the project and as we see how quickly cash is being spent, that's going to dictate the timeline and how many interest payments for the second tranche will appear in fiscal 28. But what I can definitely do is push the principal payment out, which is about 1.2 for.
Are you pushing the principal out to some other year when we need another override? And then, I mean, how far out are you pushing it?
No, I'm only
Oh,
pushing
1
it out
year.
1 year.
Oh, okay.
1 year, just so that we don't have a principal payment in combination with an override.
I feel like we're talking about two different things though. Like, I understand, like, I don't know anybody who doesn't love the idea of pushing off the second tranche into what I'm calling year 3, with any hypothetical override falling during year 2. What I'm trying to understand is the connection that Andrew was making between the amounts here, where, like, if we are avoiding a tax increase of a certain amount, that would be a reason to then further reduce the tax increase in year 2 and postpone it? Like that, I don't understand.
You're not decreasing it. You're just using the first year. The first year because you have a gap there, right? So that first year is year 2028.
Yeah, it's your.
So in reality, you have nothing going on. Nothing going on in increasing your tax bill in FY28.
Let's call, since we have 1 and 2 on the slides, let's call this year 0, which is the year that had, 50 million for
50 million,
recal,
yeah.
20 million, or sorry, 50 million for kill and 20 million for
That's year
recal.
0, yeah.
So then
Year
year 1,
Next year 28.
yes, and that is FY28, year 2 is FY29.
29, correct.
So, and yeah, so we're talking about, not having, like, year 2 will include whatever's left for kill and recal. We all
Correct.
got that, yes.
Correct, yes.
Why does more tax in year 2 mean we need to have less tax in year 1? Like, if we had more tax in year 1, I'd be like, oh crap, we can't pile anything on top of that. We should definitely spread this out. But that's exactly the opposite of what you all are talking about here. You all are talking about not having kill and recal hit in year 1, which is great.
Correct, yes.
I mean, I'm not saying not have it. We already have 1 tranche of debt that's sitting
Yes,
there.
right. Additional
And
kill
depending
and
on the
recal,
timing of
100%.
when we need
Right.
to borrow that second tranche, there could be interest payments, and I've got
Yep.
2 interest payments budgeted into fiscal '28. If we need less, that's savings that's built into that fiscal '28 budget, because I budgeted 2 interest payments, not knowing, right? So what I feel like is, we have a couple problems here. One is, we have such a large structural deficit that we're going to be forced to use more free cash than we wanted to if we spread it. But the other thing that we have working in our favor is the fact that we had said that these 2 projects would cost the average taxpayer about $1,000 for the 2 projects combined. And in fiscal '27, you saw about, I think it was like 563 or something like that. So almost $600 of it you already saw. So you've got another, if we had spent the whole amount on these projects, you had about another $400, a little bit more than $400 that would be scheduled to hit for the second tranche, and we're pushing it out. But looking at Killam being half of that money that's left over, you're really looking at a smaller piece. So we have to decide about that second tranche of debt is going to be significantly smaller than originally projected. So that $400 for that average home is probably going to be less. And so you might be able to better afford to spread it out. The problem is how do we cover in fiscal '28 the $9.8 million structural deficit? Do we agree to use $4 million of free cash and do cuts and other things to get down so that we're not back in the same problem where we're using way too much free cash? We want to try to adhere to what Jane had recommended, which was trying to use it just for capital, one-time expenses, which is what we always used to do in the past. But because this timing of inflation was so incredibly bad that we were doing everything we can to buy time, and now we're out of time. Like, things didn't work in our favor last year. Needing $1 million for snow and ice, not ideal. So we've exhausted our excess reserves. So we have to be really careful about how much free cash we use. And so we really have to have a real plan about what we do for fiscal '28 in terms of how much free cash we allow. And if we're doing a spreading out of this, which could work, but we have to acknowledge that it's going to affect regeneration a little bit in fiscal '28, because if we use more free cash, that's less regeneration. So we just have to decide what is the right approach here, because we have to find a way to close that gap between the $6.5 million and the 9.8 structural deficit. Is that using a little bit more free cash and cutting positions? And that gives us some leeway about maybe selecting one of these options to spread it out, because I do think it would make it a lot more digestible. At the same time, those 2 problems are kind of competing against each other, because nobody wants to get an override and see their services impacted because we still have to cut. You know what I mean? So we're weighing what is the right choice here in terms of how we structure this.
Okay, does anyone else on the group? Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a few, I'm trying to keep this as high level as possible, because obviously this is quite confusing and difficult for the average resident. So I attended the select board meeting and saw the robust debate between the phasing in, and obviously there wasn't even a consensus on the amount. There was a consensus to a degree that phase-in could work. I think, however, where we stand today is only 50 days into this fiscal year and another 70 plus to the election. I think it's difficult to try to add another layer of complexity from what is a binary choice of it's either 0 or it's 6.5, or it's possibly 6.5 with an asterisk. That could be 5.5 or 5, and that may influence some people's vote. But some people may vote no regardless of this phase-in. Some people are going to vote yes because they expect full services to be restored, or not capped, I shouldn't say restored. So it's very difficult to, at this point, this far away, to try to make a recommendation, in my opinion. Certainly can discuss it. I don't think it's the best time to maybe vote. I think the best time to vote on this is after the election, which unfortunately makes a very difficult, tight timeline. And obviously it's anecdotal, but if this vote were to be anything over 60-40, I think it's somewhat clear they want the full 6.5. If it was 51-49, I think conversation starts turning to this. But at the end of the day, in any of these scenarios, and I know the ones the select board talked about, it still leads to reductions in staff in year 1, unless you want to make up with free cash. And I personally do not think it's available or prudent to use any more free cash other than capital. So I don't see the efficiency of only having it in 1 year and then having to lay off 15 staff members and then in year 2 try to rehire them back. I just don't understand. So I think we're on a track right now where the voters will speak in November and say yes or no. It's either 6.5 or 0. And if it's 0, I think we completely pivot. The town's gonna have to pivot and say, now the select board needs to decide whether it's another question in the spring and what the number is, and it'll probably be somewhere closer between 3 and 4. So I think we are putting the cart before the horse a little bit here. I appreciate the discussion. I understand the select board's very cognizant of the impact and then all the discussion about the second levels of debt, but I think this discussion needs to kind of happen either closer to the election or immediately after the election once the results come in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the board? Go ahead, Joe.
I will just take this opportunity to agree with Chris that I do not like the idea of passing any override and still spending free cash above and beyond, what we need for capital in FY28. This is our opportunity to, get back on track and to establish that new policy, and I really don't want to miss that opportunity.
Okay, thanks. I guess before I go to if any of the other boards have anything, Ed had his hand as I was going asking you, Emily. Go ahead, Ed. Ed, you could go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, just trying to hit my mute
Oh,
button.
sure.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Marianne. I agree with Kristen and Joe. I think it's fine. I definitely understand the sensitivity and the timing and everything, but I think the general theme is if we're, there's a lot of in the flow chart, there's these, if, when, if yes, if no, but to how Joe just put it, if it does pass, I have a hard time, kind of co-signing on using more free cash than we need. And, this is, and not to kind of rehash our original recommendations, but that's why, multiple options, this kind of further, defends what we recommended originally. Having multiple options gives you multiple options to figure out how to phase it in. So since we're left with one option, and in that binary decision, if it is in the affirmative, I think I don't think phasing it in makes sense. It definitely, and I'm looking at it strictly from a budget perspective, and not ignoring the sensitivities to the taxpayer. But I think Chris might have said it. I think the expectation to the taxpayer, if they vote, if this gets approved and they're seeing it, they're now going to see less than what they're getting, before the override. I think that's that's not something I can get behind and recommend.
Thanks, Ed. And I guess too, on top of all of this, the taxes, everyone's taxes is still going up the 2.5% a year on top of this, and that adds up after a few years. And we don't know how the CPA vote will be, because that's another 1% on top of all of this. And we could have another bad winter. Now, on the other side, I mean, select board hasn't decided on this, but there's the thought of what are we doing with the Pleasant Street Center? There could be sales of property or different things that could provide one-time injections to free cash, but that should not weigh into this kind of a decision. I don't know. I came in here thinking I was favoring the $4.5 million, and the real, my understanding, just what really looks like smoothing. Let's raise the increases, but the shortfall is the shortfall unless we decide, what was the budget isn't going to be what the budget is, and we don't need everything, and then we're not as much of a shortfall, and we're not there yet. Andrew, you look like you have a question because you're nodding.
I just wanted to make a comment because on the amount, we had a pretty good discussion about the amount. Some things are out of our control, so the select board decided to go with a different amount. They have their own opinions. We have our own opinions. We do our research. So there's always gonna be different opinions across the town, and different boards think different way. They have their own constituent that they get advice from. But I think we still have an obligation to have a discussion about this. If we leave it, oh, what's gonna happen after the election, this and that, I don't think that we are doing our job. I think our job is to discuss what we have in front of us. Best, we have a discussion, not, maybe we don't vote for it, but at least we have a discussion about what's happening, why this matters, how would we go about this, and how it's gonna impact the taxpayers in such a way that it's smooth. I think there's nothing wrong with this. This is why we're here to discuss it. It's a different conversation what happens, and Chris is completely right. We might be wasting our time.
We could
I don't
always
see it.
decide on this
Yeah.
a year later, like, and
Exactly.
surprise voters.
And
we're
I
doing-
say that's why we're here. We're having a discussion about this, and with the facts that were presented, we've all done our own research. We give our opinion, and Chris says I wait, and he's completely right. I look at it and I say there's people that can afford not phasing it at all, and maybe that's the way to go, just one time. But it still doesn't address the full structural deficit that we're in it. So we did our research. We said this is the amount. The town did the research. They said this is the amount, and then it changed. Okay, so all of these have consequences down the line. We're gonna be back after a year and a half, and say, okay, what happened? So I think we should probably focus more on the facts of what we have, and try to do, at least provide an advice, the best advice that we can as a finance committee board to what we have present. If we all decide, okay, we're gonna wait until the election, then that's fine, and why we're here.
Yep. Sharon, you had something to add?
I just wanted to add a few pieces of information to the conversation. So this budget for fiscal '28 has about $4 million of capital, so we could justify that much use of free cash. There's other things about this budget that I think I've mentioned, and you even mentioned it in your memo, is that we had about $1 million of additional costs for the 2 new buildings, and recal is pretty much going to be there probably just about the whole year. So the costs for recal are built in and have to be there. But Killam is only going to be there probably for 3 or 4 months of the year. So we could look at that and say, we're not really using free cash. We've got it built in here, but this building is not going to be here the whole year, depending on, unless this building timeline moves faster. If we did use more free cash, we could say, but we're just trying to build this up to the baseline level that we need to cover those extra costs. So we have the baseline for the Killam in there at a full year, but we know we're not paying for a full year. So it's kind of an in and out of free cash, I guess is what I look at it. I prefer not to have to do it, but it definitely would help the smoothing effect.
How much does that amount to? It's like, say, we call this like the bonus extra free cash padding to cover the next unexpected snowstorm
I'd have
or
to
pipe
separate the
bursting.
costs to come
But
up with
is it
it.
on the order of $1 million?
$1 million is between the 2 buildings.
Okay.
But Killam is the bigger of the 2 buildings. So if I were to pull out Killam and say, okay, how much of the added cost that I had added in here, how much of it is for Killam? And if I only need 75% of it, this is how much of built-in regeneration is built into this budget, because we're building in a full year, right? The other area that we have there's a couple other areas where we have some issues that could actually work in our favor. We reworked the health insurance, and we were still told to expect 10% increases until things are sure to settle down. As we get closer to January, we tend to know what that health insurance number is. And if it's lower, if it's in our favor, that helps that budget. The other thing is as we get closer on with the building of each project and seeing the timeline, if I'm able to say, oh, we're going to only need 1 interest payment, just 1 interest payment falling off of this fiscal ` budget could make an impact. I mean, so there are some things that could go in our favor here. It's just not apparent right now exactly what, unless we really wanted to have me carve out exactly what Killam cost, and what I think 4 months, 3 or 4 months of Killam's cost would be, and know that we're putting free cash in there just to have it regenerate back, because we're not
Yeah,
gonna
I mean,
spend it.
that's just, it's not part of the messaging. It's just kind of bonus to cover something unexpected. I think Ed Ross has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Ann. And was just on that last point, Sharon, and again, and maybe I'm asking something that's too difficult, but why would we go through the circular free cash, go into free cash and take it out of free cash and not just strike it? And so that the top line number came down. And it's you just kind of, and again, maybe that's just an optical thing, but I'm just thinking about it in the context of if is that a different way of looking at it and communicating it so that the number is actually, the top line number does come down, because we're making kind of structural decisions about where we're going to spend the money, and this might not even be a kind of a fair request, but I'm just trying to think like that might be another way to look at it.
So the reason I wanted both projects to be in there for a full year, because you're asking for override, you want to be self-sustaining and at the total budget for both those buildings. The unknown is how fast the projects are going to go. I mean, the OPM had said to us that sometimes you have a contractor that wants to speed up the project and could speed up and finish early. I want to make sure I have the budget for that building to open early if it's a possibility, which that doesn't typically happen, but you do have contracts that do that. The other thing that Jane had talked about was, kind of scaling back positions on the town side, where she's the new town manager. She was looking to restructure things the way that she would like this. So there could be 3 to 5 positions she might either hold open or cut or collapse down. But also we have a hiring freeze. Maybe we leave some of those positions unfilled for that whole year, just to get us through that year. So it's like, it's less than ideal. It's nice to have the budget fully loaded with all of the positions that are needed, with the full year of additional expenses for these buildings, because you really don't know for sure what month they're really coming on. You want to have that flexibility. I would love to say just strike it but then what if I'm wrong and now the project's coming, on early and we don't have enough money built into the budget? So that's the reason for trying to get the full year there, just to be sure that no matter when that building comes on, that we have the money to cover the utilities and all the costs that come along with it.
Right, and we may, depending on the override or whatever, or even if it passes, we may still decide to build up, reduce the operating hours, maybe, even if it doesn't change the staffing, just to build up some savings. Okay, I think Jeffrey Coram had his hand up, one of the board members in the audience.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Jeffrey Coram, Ridge Road. A couple things to say here. So, generally I agree with what Chris and Angie were saying about people wanting the override and expecting the services to stay and not wanting to draw down more free cash. And also, without the gentleman who was there at the meeting forum last night, who was, inclined to vote against, how do we find whether there are a significant number of people who would be influenced by this change? If there are a number of people, I'm sure, who are going to vote no regardless, and a number of people who are going to vote yes regardless, and who's in the middle that would be convinced by this? And correct me if I'm wrong, Sharon, but the average tax bill is something like $10,000. So the $4.5 million, $2 million stage thing, it's like $200 out of 10,000 is like 2%, or $50 a quarter. Like that doesn't seem to be a big, not going to move the needle a lot in terms of, yes, that it's still $200, but it seems like out of the 10,000, it's not really going to make a significant difference to many people. Some people, yes, but not many people. The other one thing I will note, somebody just brought up the CPA. And actually on the CPA, I could imagine that this board could take a position that if the CPA passes, then we would do the override later. That in some sense, right, the CPA, if we take that tax, we get a little bit of matching from the state. So if we get that money, which most of the things that the CPA has covered are things that we have in our budget already. If we could use the CPA money that we get a little match from the state instead of the override money, then absolutely, let's reduce the taxes that we take for the override because we're getting CPA money. And that would be a reason we're not going to need to pull any more out of free cash, but we would decrease the amount of the override and the impact on the vote on the taxpayers. And there was one other question I had for Sharon. You mentioned that Killam is the bigger of the two new buildings, but it's also true that we have an existing Killam that is presumably taking some amount of money. So I'm curious, is the new Killam going to be significantly more expensive than the old Killam? I mean, I guess it's a little larger, but I guess I'm surprised that if it would be significantly more expensive than old Killam compared with what the Recal Center is going to be.
So I can not speak to how the numbers were derived because they were done by facilities, but I expected Killam to be more because of its mere size, bigger than the school that's already there. And I would expect that the estimates that I got from facilities are conservative to be sure to be enough, right? So they could be too high. So that's the other thing. It's really hard when a building doesn't exist to determine all of the cost related to it. So you're going to probably default to being a little bit more conservative about those numbers. So, and we do have a building already in its place. And so you would think that they would just match up, but not necessarily. The larger building and a newer building is much more expensive to insure. So I was shocked at the estimate we got back for insurance for the two buildings. So there was a lot of surprises when we started to pull back kind of some of the expenses that come with all these buildings. Even just the normal contracts that they maintain for all the buildings, like, you know, elevator contracts and maintenance contracts and all of those things that you're just not thinking, oh, this is a new building, it doesn't need any maintenance. But they do have all these contracts they maintain for all the buildings, the cleaning contracts. If the building is bigger, it's going to cost us more to have it cleaned. So there was a lot that you just, once you start to look at the costs related to a building, you start going, wow, this is a lot of money. I think we had thought it would be somewhere around $750, and I think the insurance brought it up over $1 million for the two buildings just for operating costs. So, and I'd rather have the cost built into this budget be conservative and potentially on the high side than too low.
Right. Sure. I have one other question, that is, suppose we did spread the override out, and then suppose, you know, we had an excessive snow and ice year, or health insurance goes way over budget. Is the select board able to override this? Would they, you know, suppose we said we're going to do this spreading it out. Can we change our mind? And, you know, I wouldn't want that to fall on one person, so everybody in town is really mad at the one person or even the select board. But can we go to town meeting and say, hey, town meeting, we know we said we were going to split it up, but with, you know, the snow and ice that we had this year, we really need to take more of that override this year compared with pushing it off to next year.
Ideally,
is this decision?
Ideally, if we tell the taxpayers something, we try not to go against what we tell them. So if we tell them, oh, you're going to see this much hit 1 year and year two, this much, we would try to keep our promise. So I'm not entirely sure what the process would be if we had to go against what we said. I would prefer not to do that because you really want your residents to trust what you say. So I'm not entirely sure who would make that call if we had to do that. But I would be very uncomfortable doing that. Ideally, doing the 6.5 and not spreading it is the easiest one for us to pull off because, you know, it sits within what we can use for free cash with the capital that we're planning for fiscal, you know, 28. But the number is high. $736 is not a small amount of money. So the reason we're entertaining this is just to try and make them a little bit more digestible, but it's not easy. None of it is.
If I can just respond to a couple of Jeffrey's points. I mean, yes, you might say, oh, you know, $50 a quarter or $200, like this isn't on a $10,000 bill. This might not look like a lot, but I don't know if you've gone to the town has a calculator that comes basically within like 30 cents of the recal calculator. And my bill is going to go up $1,945, and I have about a 10,000. Like if I checked all the boxes, and the full impact comes in. So, and that's including what's come for Killam. So to me, I think I've gotten 2 phone calls today just from citizens who know me saying, what's up with this? Why are my taxes going up $2,000? And I said, well, they're not. It all depends on those things passing, but some of it's already baked in because we approved of it. So that's what's going to be noticeable. And then regarding CPA, I think, Jeffrey, you and I always have this debate. I mean, yes, there's this state matching, but CPA is limited, and not everything in our capital plan is covered by CPA. Some of the items that were listed as being cut if the override doesn't pass, an ambulance, like a $500,000 mannequin, cruisers. I mean, there's a lot of things in our capital plan that aren't parks and recreation, and affordable housing. And if we have an extra,
There's zero.
pardon me?
Sorry, I had to interject that there is exactly zero for affordable housing in our operating budget and capital plan.
Okay,
The
yeah, but I
Reading Housing
mean-
Authority is entirely self-funded.
But there's a lot of capital things that my understanding of CPA aren't covered by CPA. Yes, if we had Birch Meadow Phase 4 or more pickleball courts or certain things, and historical preservation, but we are limited. And if your average resident is going to throw another $100 on their tax bill, they may want it to go towards something else, keeping a cop, keeping a teacher. That was just my view. I like CPA, but this isn't the time for it. I just saw a flash. I think Karen Herrick had her hand up before. I just want to double check. No one else on the finance
Yep.
committee board? Okay, go ahead, Karen.
No, I was just going to also remind the committee that the Pleasant Street Center needs work, and it is a historical building. Town Hall needs work. It's also a historical building. So we haven't necessarily put these things into the capital plan yet, but you can expect that they'll be coming. And, Joshua Eaton's a historical school. So, yeah, just.
Oh, we could sell the Pleasant Street Center and get some free cash, right? Okay.
But we could also sell Oakland Road. We had one former town meeting member send us, the select board, a
Oh,
letter
Bill
requesting
Brown, yep.
us to sell Oakland Road.
Well, Oakland Road, the Oakland Road land that they were considering, that Fidel had been considering, and then, yeah, it's still there as lots. And desperate times call for desperate measures. If the override doesn't pass, that one, we may have to have a yard sale and start selling stuff. Yep. So I think we've reached the end. I think we've probably exhausted our discussion of the phasing. So I feel like we should take a vote to recommend our view on phasing, which I'm sensing is kind of unanimous of let's not decide on, let's not phase, let's not try to put out a phasing message before the election at best, and either not phase or not decide now. Does anyone want to clarify that? That's what I'm hearing. I think, Chris, you started. Chris and Joe. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, no, I think it's totally fair if anyone wants to do a motion for one of these tranches and take a vote on either of them. But I don't know if it's consensus that we don't want to do anything, but some people may feel differently. I'm certainly willing to entertain any vote.
If I could suggest some wording, I might, move that the Finance Committee not recommend to split the override impact at this time.
I think you have to phrase it in the affirmative, and then we would vote no. So I think you have to make it, we would recommend.
So
it's not so confusing.
Well, okay.
move to collect the full amount of the override with no phasing at this time.
So phasing or not phasing?
I mean, we're making a recommendation, so we're not,
We're not saying never phase. We're saying let's, right?
So it's
this is hard.
because if it's not a specific one, you're just, it's a
Right. I mean,
hypothetical unknown. And again, I'm
we're-
probably going to abstain because I'm not trying to say yes or no, because I think personally it's too early. I would be absolutely willing to entertain a more formal vote after the election, but whatever way it goes, I'm probably going to abstain.
We could say we have no recommendation on phasing at this time. But
Which means
that's
you wouldn't take
kind
a
of
vote at all.
wimping out.
You
Yeah.
could just not vote at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should say it's discussion. That's up to the chair.
All right.
We can table that. We can
Yeah,
table discussion
okay.
till later time.
Move to table the phasing discussion.
So moved.
Okay.
And Joe McDonough second.
Okay, we'll take a vote on tabling the discussion. I'll start offline. Ed Ross?
Yes.
Andrew? Joe Carnahan?
Yes.
Mark Sarah?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
Chris Cook?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
McDonough? Yes. Mary Ann, yes. Okay. So I think that's 8-0, right?
Tabling, that's
To
an excellent way to
table
put
the
it.
discussion.
Yes.
But now there's another part to our discussion, and we don't have to, we can just kind of be informal, because we've alluded to it, which is override public forum feedback. I don't know, has anyone here not been at one of the public forums yet, whether online or in person? You haven't been to one. And I know that there's board members from other boards who have been at the forum. So I've heard, I've kind of been speaking as a member of the public and kind of asking maybe more of the schools than the town, some hard questions. And I appreciate, I don't always get the answers that I want, but I get answers, which is good. Like, asking about the need for positions. I asked the town manager about going to high deductible health plans, which I think are in the GIC, which we're not in, but my research has only uncovered a couple of places that do that. So I think I would encourage the rest of to the extent you go, like, don't be afraid to ask questions as a member of the public, even just so the public hears the answers, because some of these are the questions they ask. But, and there's a poll out on the recal. Anyway, I just wanted, if anyone's witnessed the forum or heard any override feedback, do you have anything, like, because we have a few more forums. And just like I said, the messaging could be confusing if we suddenly started talking phasing. Is there something, we're kind of repeating the same spiel at each forum as if people haven't heard it. And if anyone has any suggestions, I suppose that would be good to know. Go ahead, Emily.
So I thought they've been, the content's been consistent and helpful. I think that there's been some good questions from the public, and I think town staff has done an awesome job of, kind of answering them and helping people understand. I came in hot last night right from work, so I was online, but it looked like there was very few people in the room. And so I would just love for us to figure out how to reach more people. So everyone I've talked to, like, hey, there's an override coming. They're like, what even is an override? What does that mean? And so, I've done a lot of just talking with my friends, colleagues, family members that live in town. I don't know if there's like a town, I know you're posting on social media and doing, what you can. I don't know if there's a way to reach out through like the Pleasant Street Center or the rec, listserv or any other listservs you may have available in town. I'd just love to figure out a way to get a little bit more engagement, because I think the only people I saw online for last night's or yesterday's was like one public member and everyone else was on a board. So the more we can reach people,
I wonder if we could put it on the lighted sign, town website, override info, everyone who drives by or so.
Yeah.
The one challenge we have is we can't promote the override.
No, but
can't
we
spend
can
public
direct
funds
people to our page.
Exactly. So we have to be careful about how we get the message out.
Can we direct them to the town website?
Yeah, and that's what we've been doing, and we use our social media pages to direct people. That first webinar had more on it than this last one, so.
I think it's the timing, because it was
timing was
5:30,
less than
people are
ideal for
commuting
people,
home.
yeah.
and-
5:30, a lot of people are still at work or heading home.
Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Andrew.
So I've talked to a few people in town, and one interesting feedback that I got was that a lot of people, the people that I talk to, they're okay with paying for services. The one feedback that I got constantly was, what am I getting from the X amount of money on the override? And to follow up on that, it was even more interesting that one of them goes, I vote on all elections, or I go at the voting poll constantly. My problem goes, I have no time to do research, so I depend on what I read on the ballot. And he goes, if it says on the ballot that out of this override I'm going to get X, I'm going to get this, and that, it just makes my life easier because I can decide there and then. It's just a feedback. It's just feedback.
You mean
what-
like the menu list Jane had
Exactly,
said,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
doing this
So
keeps this thing versus.
it just informs you like the overriding for X
Yeah,
amount.
it's
and
too
out of
late
this,
to change
It's
our
gonna
ballot,
be
though.
it's gonna be allocated to these categories, I guess. That was one feedback that I got. Another feedback that I got was they were opposed to a high ticket price override and pro to low tickets override that would attack specific issues. And then I followed up and I asked, like, what's a low ticket override? And they said less than 2 million. Just interesting feedback, that's all. They said less than 2 million, that's a low ticket override.
Well, like,
And I would rather pay, he goes like, I'd rather do every 2 or 3 years low ticket overrides than like a
some
7 million, yeah.
Or it could be very specific, like I saw Marblehead broke their override up, and they had 1.7 million override just for trash. And then there was the operating override, and both passed, but people could clearly say, they could say, well, all I care about is my trash, and
That's a
that
feedback.
pits groups against each other a little bit, but, yeah. And I think, Joe Carnahan, did you have comments, or?
Jane has her hand
I mean,
up.
I was just going to make a
Jane,
face
yeah.
because I think the wording on the ballot is, heavily controlled by Massachusetts state law. And so regardless of what your neighbor wants, we're stuck following the law.
I agree.
Okay, I saw, I think Ed Ross has his hand up, but I think the town manager had her hand up, so we'll go to Jane quickly first.
Thanks, I appreciate the feedback from folks. I was just gonna echo what Sharon said. We have to be really, really careful about how we utilize taxpayer resources to notify people about the override. To that end, we have to be very careful what we put in a newsletter. We absolutely can't mail anything or put something in something that is mailed. So the Pleasantries newsletter, which does get mailed to certain houses, cannot have specific information about the override. It's very frustrating. As you know, you may know, I have a podcast. I have to ask for legal opinion from the Office of Campaign and Public Finance to see if I can do a podcast about the override where I'm asking questions. I mean, it's really frustrating. So we're trying to be very, very careful. I love the light board question, and I'm going to follow that up with council.
Can we at least tell them, hey, there's an election and there's Reading specific issues on the ballot you should educate yourself about? Can we educate them about the election? I mean, I always
We
would
can,
say,
and
can we
we
have a
can tell
reverse
them.
911 about the election? Just,
We can't do that.
no?
No, we can't. We can say that there's a statewide election. We can notify people about that, but we haven't had a practice of doing that. And so to do it now would be seen or could be seen as self-serving.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we
it's
do it
not-
for touch a truck, and, well, not
There's
this
traffic
year, it was in the
impacts, yeah,
past.
there's
Yeah.
pedestrians crossing the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. This is really a question for the town clerk. And she has resisted doing that because we've had the debt exclusion votes. And we don't want it to be, it's a practice that once we do it, it should be done in a neutral.
Yeah, you have to
sort
do
of
it all the
neutral
time.
election. Yeah, and then done all the time.
Okay.
But I like the light board question. And yes, we absolutely can direct people to our website. That's fair. And we work to make sure that our website is as clear and factual as it can be.
Yeah, because the light boards, they do tell people, vote at the high school November 4th,
Yep.
or something like that, so, okay.
It's factual, like where to vote, but not how to vote.
Oh, yeah,
Not,
no,
you know,
I was
like
just saying,
reach
like,
out.
where, get info. I
Yep,
think, okay,
and
Ed,
then,
oh, go ahead, sorry, you're still going.
I'm sorry. For Andrew's question, the ballot question is governed, but it does state on there the purpose of this override vote is a general override for the schools, the police department, the fire department. It names a bunch of different departments in general government. So it lists things out there.
Yeah, I was just quoting a feedback.
Points well taken.
Okay. And I think, Ed, you had your hand up again? Jane, were you done?
Thanks.
Because I'm going to come back to you at free cash. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ed.
Thanks, Marianne. Thanks for opening up this to get some feedback. For my opinion, I think maybe a slightly different take. I just want to thank Jane and Sharon and Dr. Turner for doing it. And probably most importantly for not, for continually, persevering and not taking it personally. I don't believe that this is that we're in this situation from overspending or mismanagement or and I personally get defensive when I read those types of comments. I can completely understand anyone kind of from a staff perspective feeling similarly, and so I think that's kind of first and foremost. Really appreciate everything that that folks are doing to be able to communicate the situation that we're in, and doing it in a as efficiently and effectively as you have been, and you continue to have my support, as you kind of go through that. My kind of greater wish is that more of the of our kind of elected officials offer that same type of support in these types of forums. That they have the most freedom to be able to do that, and the clock is ticking, and time is running out. So I think that's these are the leaders of the town, and I think they're I know a lot of the folks that I speak to ask those questions, and hopefully that they're hearing the same thing. My last thing that I wanted to say, and again, Marianne, thanks so much for allowing me to do this, but my caution. And this may just be my own kind of personal opinion around this. I worry for us, that are on kind of boards and committees from kind of getting past that line of like where we're making recommendations or suggestions on what could be cut or should be cut. I think that might just be going a little bit too far. And so I worry about that from that perspective. And again, I know that anyone can make certain make comments and questions and so forth as residents. But I think there's a line there, and so I'm cautious around that piece of it. Marianne, I really again appreciate you having me communicate. I have to drop now, but so you guys can vote freely now. You're welcome.
Are you okay with your liaison assignments before you go? We're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. But
yeah, I'm fine with that.
All right,
and
then
if you have to settle me something,
we won't volunteer you for anything that you're not on.
I can see Joe's already frothing at the mouth, ready to give me something bad. So that's fine. Carnahan.
Okay.
I can see.
Which Joe?
I can see him.
Yeah.
Joe Carnahan. I can see what you're doing. I can see you nodding. You're waiting to give me something bad. I get it.
Okay. So.
Thanks, everybody.
Madam Chair, just one
yeah,
final
Chris, you
question on
had some
this point.
feedback? Yeah.
Sure. Just a follow-up question for the town manager and eventually the town clerk, just similar to the lighting boards, as much as legally possible without committing a campaign finance violation, if we could get that at the September primary towards the high school, people will be coming to vote in person. And if they just see override information, readingmass.gov, that'd be ideal. But obviously, if it can't be done because of legal reasons, it is what it is.
I'm sorry, what did you want at the September primary?
If these light boards can be done, it would be, I think, ideal if it would be somewhere as legally allowed close to where people vote, Oakland
I have
Road.
to tell them about the September election first, probably.
Yeah. But if people are going to be driving in and out to vote
Yeah.
for that election, then if we were able to put generic override information, that'd be ideal, because these are people that will probably be voting in November as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Great, thank you.
So any more feedback before we move on to the next topic? Okay, I don't see hands. All right, so this can be an ongoing topic, and I think the next topic on our agenda before, I guess I call the easy stuff later, is something substantive, which is a free cash usage policy. And I did not prepare information on that. I think I was relying on the town manager with some information on free cash usage policy, or are we just going to wing it?
Happy to speak to it. Madam
Thank
Chair.
you.
So, as most of us know, many other communities typically determine, they have their free cash certified in the fall by DOR, and then they go to their fall subsequent or special town meeting and appropriate monies from free cash for capital projects. And then they either leave their remaining amount of free cash on the table, or they appropriate it into a stabilization fund. And so it's typically what many towns do, and they keep their capital expenditures, their one-time expenditures coming out of free cash. Not all of them, but that's kind of what they do, is say, here's the things we want to buy in the fall that we didn't put it in our annual budget, and we have this funds and funding, and so that's what we're going to do. And so my proposal for the board's discussion is for us to move to a policy where the amount of free cash that we use doesn't exceed the capital portion of our budget. And it doesn't have to equal it, but it shouldn't exceed it. And that way we are still using one-time funds for one-time expenditures. And when we don't find ourselves in a place where we're spending about $3 million in capital and we've got $6.5 million in free cash that we're using to plug the hole. Or there's a discussion about making a decision orthogonal to the policy that's been adopted for 1 year when we go pursue an override. Like that might be a decision that's made in the future, but at least that there's a policy and discipline that is brought forward to make sure that free cash becomes sustainable and ultimately grows. And it can either grow in free cash balances or it can be appropriated into stabilization. Other conversations that have been had or policy initiatives along the same lines would be putting that FinCom 7% or more into stabilization. Stabilization requires a 2/3 vote to appropriate out of. So it's harder to access those funds, but ideally the general agreement is we really need to do this. We really need to access these funds. And so that's why you keep it in that stabilization, but the town meeting is very confident, like that's something that we really need to spend on. I'll give you, for instance, town meeting had a majority vote on the trash receptacles. But the first vote that town manager Maltese brought forward was from stabilization for those trash receptacles. It didn't get the 2/3 majority and it failed. When it was brought back later, it came out of free cash, which only requires a simple majority to appropriate. So it's another sort of along the same lines way to build up our reserves and kind of make them a little bit harder to access. Not impossible to access, but a little bit harder to access. So I think that for the finance committee to have a robust conversation about, does it make sense to limit our free cash utilization to our capital expenditures, not capital and debt, just the capital portion. Does that help, Madam Chair?
Thank you, yes. And as I was kind of cheating while you were doing things and just seeing what the state said about free cash and the Division of Local Services, which is just kind of interesting. They just said DLS recommends that communities adopt robust free cash policies that address usage of free cash, including what percentage should be carried forward, budgeting for the creation of it, using conservative revenue, et cetera, et cetera. But then they said, just like what you said, as a non-recurring revenue source, they go even stricter. Free cash should be restricted to paying one-time expenditures, funding capital projects, or replenishing other reserves. We do not recommend that free cash be budgeted for ongoing operational purposes. So, I mean, that's just, and you said other communities are doing it, but this seems like historically in Reading, maybe there was a temptation in certain years to use a little bit as a plug, and now the plug has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. I personally also agree that it should be limited. It shouldn't be hitting, almost $10 million. We're getting addicted to it now. And because we're not realistic about what we need to run the town. Either we don't provide as many services and scale to match the taxes we collect, or we have to collect more. I mean, I don't know. And that's easy to say. We're trying to collect more. We're not going to do that. I don't know.
Well, an important distinction, and I bet Sharon's gonna mention this, and.
Yeah, she has her hand up, and then we'll go to the
I'll
group.
after, But is that Reading front loads your budget with capital, right? So in your annual town meeting, you fund your capital budget. And that's a practice that we've done, and the bond rating agencies have appreciated that we have, that we're paying for infrastructure upfront. And so that's also a good practice, but it is unusual. And so that's why I'm saying if we use one-time monies for one-time expenditures, just the things on the capital plan, and in a given year, it's still that 1-for-1 ratio, even though we're appropriating it in the spring versus the fall. So it's an important distinction. But right now, we're just using the free cash. We're not tying it to anything. We're not putting a discipline in there that says we're going to just limit it for this piece, in this case, capital. And so I don't think we have to change our process. We still have a robust capital plan. Sharon does a great job working with department heads twice a year to go through their capital plan and evaluate that twice a year. And, that's an important piece because we want to stay on top of our infrastructure. I think at one point in time, Reading got away from that many, many years ago, and that was why this policy came forward. So putting these two together, I think, is a good move. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Sharon. Thought I saw you had something to say, so I.
So I would say that the entire time I've been here, we've used free cash to support our operating budget, but in small amounts, usually less than what we'd have in there for capital. It's only been a problem in the last, since inflation has blown up, and we had those projects coming up that we decided to fill the structural deficit with free cash to buy time. That has never been the practice of the way we operated things. It was just poor timing of what was going on. I don't think that we ever wanted to have to use free cash to fill that hole, but we are also asking for 2 debt exclusions, and inflation just wasn't kind. So I would point out that the thing that makes us different is the fact that we do make sure that we hold to a discipline of a certain percentage of our budget is capital. And prior to these inflationary years, the amount of free cash we used to support this budget was well less than what we spent on capital.
It was like under $2 million.
And
usually.
we tend to regenerate more than what we would put into this budget. So I feel like this issue that we're having is more of the last few years where we're trying to spend down our reserves a little bit because nobody wants to give you an override too when you've got $20 million sitting there, even though we need 15 or 20%. So it was kind of a necessary evil in some ways because when you have that kind of reserves laying around, people just think, even though you need the 15 or 20, you need to spend some of that before I'm giving you anything towards the operating budget. At least that's the way I feel. So I guess kind of like, I don't think it's been our practice the entire time I've been here. I think this is an extraordinary period where we opted to do this to buy time to get to the debt exclusions and try and make a more optimum time. And it would have been nice if Snow and Ice cooperated. Maybe we would have gotten another year. But I don't think that the practice that we had prior was a bad practice. I feel like, but we are very different. And I think that DOS would even acknowledge that the reason we regenerate more than we use is, because we've always been very conservative about how we use it. This is not our norm.
Yeah, I mean, Snow and Ice sounds to me one time, it's snow every year. It's a one time, but all of the things, the inflation and everything is facing all of our peer communities too. Like I'm looking at the town of Andover website, and Andover's policy is to use free cash for non-recurring emergency expenditures for capital and equipment and to maintain a reserve fund. Free cash is not to be used to balance operating budgets. So that just seems to be different.
Yeah.
So I'll turn to the board. Do you have any thoughts? Anyone? Go ahead, Joey. Joe McDonough.
Yeah, I guess thanks. I'm trying to make sure I understand the problem we're trying to solve. And I'm good with I don't know, a range, a stabilization fund of 7-8%, whatever the magic number is, because I think that helps clarify more that it is a stabilization, it is for reserves, and as opposed to saying okay, we want it, we have these nice graphs, right? But I think we should be more rigid about X amount it goes into like the stabilization fund. I mean, from a capital standpoint, I like taking it off the top because I worry that projects get deferred and it's really easy to say, oh, we'll do that next year. The other thing I'd say is like, I think we could tighten up our capital improvement program. I mean, we have great spreadsheets, but be really tight about what's in the capital improvement program, especially if we end up going down a different path and exposing that to town meeting. You know, I think we have to be really clear on why we're doing certain capital improvements at a given time. And I also think we could probably, I think other towns would go to even smaller amounts, like down to like $35,000, $50,000 and call that capital. Because I see some of these budget busters when we do some tech improvements or different types of things that it doesn't sound like much money in the old days, but all of a sudden $50,000-$100,000, each department tries to figure out how we're going to pay for that for a given year. And I think we could put more things into our capital program. So, but you know, in terms of like what it might solve, like maybe we'd have like a little more discipline, and we probably aren't in a position where we have to worry about having too much free cash for a while. I mean, just my thought, but.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it seems like the budgets are being built with the expectation of us giving them budget increases that end up relying on free cash, especially, you know, post-pandemic. So it's just gotten high, but I feel like they have to know up front that, you know, it's when they start asking for the budget increases that are above 2.5%, where does the money come from? If it's not regeneration, there isn't, like, I joke with people, the free cash fairy, I mean, that's regeneration, but after that, then we're just, I don't know, it always bothered me. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Joe.
I mean, I thought I saw two other hands up before, and I've already talked a lot tonight, so.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You have the floor.
So Sharon, we do use debt to fund some long-term assets. Are we saying we're going to go away from that, or?
I think we'd still be doing things the same way, the 5% of our budget debt or capital, but what we're having issues with is some things have just increased dramatically in cost. I mean, it used to be that we used to pay maybe $600,000 for a fire truck, and now a fire truck's $1.5 million. So some things are going to be pointed more at debt, because they're just harder to fit into that capital budget the larger they get. But we would still be utilizing 5% of our budget, whether it be debt or capital. You look at debt as really capital paid for with debt. Yeah. We try and do as little as we can with the debt because we don't want to pay the interest. If we can pay it, you know, we can pay it in that 5% and not have to pay the interest, that's more ideal. But some things are just too large to fit into the capital plan in any given year. And it's getting to the point where a fire truck is getting to be too big of an item for us to have. And I think that might be one where you might see me borrow it as opposed to paying it in 1 year like we've done in the past, because it's, you know, tripled in price.
Yeah, and I think it is a good idea to fund that with debt over the life of the asset. You know, for fire engines, 15 years, to use, you know, current cash for an asset that's that old, that long, I think would be a mistake. So I think that we should continue with the debt issuance.
And I will say that S&P always comments on how quickly we pay off our debt. When we do borrow, we borrow for shorter terms, you know, the shortest term we can afford to make that asset paid sooner rather than later. So we do have a good foundation that we built our budget on. You know, that 5% of debt and capital is something I plan to continue. I think it's just maximizing what we're using in free cash. I have not been comfortable with the amount of free cash that we've had to use the last few years to get through these really hard inflationary years. So it would be nice to cap it and find other ways to make it all work.
Okay, I think Emily and Chris. Oh, we'll do Emily first. Thank you.
There's so much pointing. So yeah, Mark's question was my first question. My second question is more about moving toward stocking it away in the stabilization fund versus free cash. It sounds like that is a practice adopted by a lot of communities. What kind of return on, like, you can get investment income on your stabilization fund, right? Do you have like a sense of
So our treasurer has been getting close to 4% on the money that we invest. Obviously, those rates are falling. Now, some of them are quoting her, but she's very good about getting the highest possible rate that she can get. But we don't just lock down stabilization funds. Depending on the cash management, it's all kinds of funds are being invested, trust funds, all the things. And so because she has a lot to invest, she demands the highest possible interest rate to give the business from the town. And so we've become to rely a lot on the investment income, more so than we had in recent years as interest rates have gone up. But you always have to be cautious about counting on that because you don't know when it's going to go the other way. Yeah. And she's been very good about trying to maintain a high level of investment income because we've needed it so badly during this inflationary period.
Cool.
Thank you, Chris, then Joe.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. So just broad general comments, I would obviously be supportive of a more formal documented free cash use policy. I'll try to stay online here, not to commit a violation, but I think it could be incorporated by reference in 2 other policies that we have that have become a little stale. And based on my early conversations about our reserves, that I think the reserves policy, taking into account stabilization, free cash, the FinCom reserve, could probably use a refresh and address a lot of the minimum issues where we'd like the number to get higher. And I think some other maybe mechanisms or at least suggestions about stocking money into the stabilization. One, I always thought is, obviously we've had a very high interest rate environment and we're coming in well above budget on interest income. I think it would be a good idea to start considering plugging that, whatever that amount is over the budget into stabilization every single year and just get that number back up to 10, 11, whatever, 7, 9 that is. So that creates kind of a fortress for the town, for the bond agencies to say it's 2/3 in, 2/3 out. But people probably won't be tempted to spend them on anything like that. But I think it's a great time to kind of think about the other policies we have in town in conjunction with coming up with free cash use policy.
Yeah, I guess we have to see if we're going to be in the fortunate position of even having enough free cash to worry about. We'll know in a few months. And Joe?
Thank you, Mary Ann. So I'll go a couple questions in for my comments. So first, I'll go to the more recent question about that's sort of building off Emily's question. Just making sure I understood what you said. There's no difference in the amount of investment income the town makes off of free cash for stabilization funds, correct? The same dollar makes the same 4%.
Yeah.
Regardless.
And
Cool.
actually S&P looks at them as reserves.
Yeah.
But one thing I will say is that the term free cash is very misleading. Stabilization is very much understood. And so the more you have in the stabilization, the more people look at it and say, that's the rainy day fund. We can't touch that. But free cash, just the way that word is horrible. People think that that's just available money. And we actually have it as reserves that we need to have on hand. So I don't love the name of free cash. And I think if more is in the stabilization fund, people will look at that number as not touchable. And also our free cash number isn't such a lightning rod. When we had $19 million just sitting in free cash and then another couple million sitting in stabilization, people are like, you have tons, you don't need it. You know what I mean? So when you know that you need 10, 15, 20% in reserves, have as much of that as you can in a stabilization so that we're showing less in this free cash number that people think is available to spend on anything.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. My next question, this is going to build off of Mark's question about the debt versus capital. What's the rationale for limiting free cash usage to capital versus debt and capital? I'm assuming that wasn't an arbitrary choice, but I'm wondering if there's an explanation for that.
I think Jane was looking at it more of the capital because most other communities, when you see that they're using their free cash, they'll say that we'll use it for one-time use, and that is capital. And capital changes every year how much you spend on it. It's, you don't have to have it every year. It's not like something like I need this much every year. It's one of those type of expenses where debt is kind of one of those operational expenses. It's part of your budget and you know how much you're going to need each year. So I think that piece of it is kind of more one time, the capital piece, whereas the debt is being spread out and there's a set payment that's owed on that debt so it becomes kind of part of your operational expenses in some ways. I think that might have been what she was thinking, but I agree with it. Yeah.
That's exactly it.
All right, I don't have a strong, I mean, I know that most of our capital is capital rather than debt. I also know that there are like 2 companies in North America that make fire trucks, and as a result, they're, fire trucks cost, some horrifying 7-digit number each.
And we're waiting 3 or 4 years to get
And
them.
we're waiting years to get them. So like that might be, but I don't know. We'll that's still not, knowing those things is not going to turn me off from this policy. That is exactly the sort of thing that I feel like we should have done a while ago. I want to make an observation about what's going on here where I don't think this is going to change how much money Reading raises or spends or what it spends it on. But I do think it's going to make it easier for residents and, for that matter, finance committee members to understand. Sharon's point about don't call your rainy day fund free. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch or free cash. It came from a taxpayer, and we're going to need it for something in the future. Likewise with the in the past, we thought about limiting free cash in terms of regeneration, which is also a responsible way to do things. Just like make sure your expenses don't exceed your income. That's how one budgets, no matter who or what one is. Given how much we spend on capital, which itself is a very responsible thing that I'm glad we do and I want to keep doing, I think we're going to be spending free cash that is less than our regeneration once assuming an override passes, and less than our capital. But it's better to talk about it as being less than our capital than to talk about it as being less than our regeneration, because we control our capital directly. Hypothetically, our regeneration can go south, and it will go south if health insurance rates change again or something like that. So I guess it's like I said, I think we'll probably be spending about the same amount and buying the same things, but I think it's a much better way to talk about it and to understand it. So I'm strongly in favor of both of these things.
And the other thing is we've exhausted our excess reserves. We want to start building it up. So the lower the free cash number is that we use to support the fiscal 28 budget, the more that number is going to recover for the next year when we're going to borrow permanently for that second tranche of debt. I want to be in that range where we don't have to question, like, if we can keep our AAA bond rating, So that's kind of another thing is the timing of it. Every time you issue permanent debt, you have to do a bond rating call. And so every time you're issuing, they decide whether or not you're still a AAA community. And so the more we regenerate that first year, the better, because we'll be in that range. And so I think there is a lot to be said about trying to minimize how much free cash we use in fiscal 28. I mean, I know we have to use the 3 million, but as I said in the past, 3 million is the number that I've seen every year for the last 15 years I've been here. That's a low number for us. So I feel like we will regenerate. But the lower that number is, the more regeneration is going to be added to free cash, and the higher that percentage is going to be when we go to do that permanent borrowing. And we're hopefully going to be in that 15% range where they wouldn't think of changing it. Because so much about what we do here in Reading is viewed very positively by S&P. They like that we don't have a lot of debt, that we pay off our debt quickly. They like a lot of the policies we have in place. And I think adding more policies regarding free cash and how we borrow and stuff like that, that only looks better. They comment sometimes they love the way we borrow and pay off quickly. But they worry that it's not written in our policy exactly how we do that, and that different managers might have very different feelings about that, and that could change how Reading operates. So I think a lot of what we've already done is viewed very positively by S&P, and we just want to continue on that path. But the big thing we have to focus on now is making sure our reserves are in that range so that we can qualify for the lowest possible rates.
Okay, so Mark, and then I saw Karen online. I'm sorry, I missed you. Like your raised hand color was similar to your background wall briefly. Then it got dark and I could see it. So sorry, I was missing it before.
Sorry,
But
it is.
but just let Mark, and then we'll go to you.
So we're talking about the free cash policy and updating it, but we haven't discussed anything about the stabilization fund and what the plan is to get that larger, like.
And that can be part of the same kind of policy because they're both considered reserves. So you could have reference to it.
But I almost hear and feel that it should be a higher priority to do that sooner rather than funding, doing that over a 10-year period. Like if the goal is to get that up to 7% of the budget, should that, while we've got a lot of free cash, should that be done in the next year or two? Like, does that need to go to town meeting, I'm assuming, to move that?
Anything
So-
going into stabilization cause a
So,
town meeting vote.
I guess my question is, should that be a high priority right now?
I think that's up to FinCom, because, that's a financial policy decision.
Can you repeat that part of the future agenda? So not just the free cash policy, but the
stabilization.
stabilization.
Yeah,
is what
Madam Chair, I
understand.
was going to recommend it towards the end to say the future agenda to cover all the bases. The next meeting is just general policy updates, whether that's a subcommittee or town staff, to kind of address this free cash use policy and updating the reserves and possibly the capital and debt. I think it can be incorporated by reference because it kind of touches both sides. But I think that those policies are from like 2018 and 2016 perhaps. So I think it's time that they are updated with the concept of the higher amounts process on moving stabilization. So be a couple of meetings, but it kind of needs to be on the agendas
Yeah,
going
I know,
forward.
I feel like, we're putting forth this override that is still reliant on the old way of supplementing the free cash, and then when we change that, it's gonna put us in a bind again with the public. But you also get the public, you would hear things like, especially after the pandemic, when the free cash was getting up like near $20 million, why can't we do everything we want? That the free cash is too high with the town, they don't, now we want to have that amount, right, for the bond, and they won't understand, but it has to be not in free cash. It has to be somewhere where we say, no, this is part of.
This is our rainy day fund.
Yeah,
The
and-
stabilization fund sells that a whole lot better than free cash.
Yeah,
I think
and
that
that's-
people recognize those are your reserves. And every year, our budget is getting larger and larger, so 10 or 15% of your budget becomes a bigger and bigger number, so you've always got to be adding.
And then, but see, that stabilization, then that can be for like the 1 million in snow, and then town meeting can appropriate. It's not like, oh, just we have a running account. Okay, I'm going to go to Karen Herrick online too, because you've been waiting patiently.
Okay, thank you. I love the finance committee. What a great discussion. My blood pressure is going down. Thank you. So many great comments. And so that seminar that I forwarded you today, I know it calls municipal bond ratings, but it was like a far-reaching discussion topping. So, getting even some of the things that Chris just said, advising communities, the bond rating agencies will look at your policies, and if your policies date back to the previous administration, then they need to be looked at, or we strongly suggest you work with them. So all of the stuff, I just came away from that seminar like feeling like, okay, we're on the right track. Ed had a question earlier about, do lots of communities use bonds and fund things the way we are? It's in there. They talk about that. I mean, it just might make you feel better if you have time to look at it. And then I was wondering if you might consider the capital policy flexibility. DLS, when they came in the spring, it's not, we have lots of policies, you have lots of policies, and they're not all written down. For instance, the OPEB flexibility policy, you guys will make a decision. Can we do our goal, or are we gonna back off, or someday we might wanna do more? That they recommended that those kind of things just be written down. So like just expanded a little bit beyond, so that, that might be something you want to look at. And then the question I had for you all to maybe consider is, so we've been in the process of building 2 new buildings, which involves a lot of capital expenditure, which, in this very tight financial situation we've been in, I've been like, are we being the slave to 5% capital? There's a lot of capital in those buildings that we would normally pay for. So we might talk about, could there be flexibility, written approaches to flexibility and capital spending? If we're doing these other things, or if it's a tight year, lots of inflation, unexpected expenses, could we agree that, we might spend in the range of invest in 3% up to 5% per year? I think these building projects are like the perfect example, and I worry that trying to do our annual 5% on top of all this other capital is just a lot. And I think about how people make decisions in their own lives, and they might just shift things a little differently. So that's it. I love this discussion. Thank you so much.
Can I respond to that?
Oh, yes, Sharon wants to respond.
I definitely think that would be great if we could do it. I do feel like inflation has hit capital probably just as hard as anything else. And so it's taking us a long time to get some of the capital that we need to have replaced. So trucks, DPW trucks that maybe have a life of 15 years, I'm lucky if I get to them by 18 or 20 years. Like it's affecting us in our timeline of when we get to replace something where we were much better prior to the inflationary period. So supply chain issues have been an issue and increased costs. So everything that we do in our capital plan has gone up double-digit percentages easily. And so it makes it harder to make that number smaller because those numbers, what we're paying for a truck, like a truck that might have been a $140,000 dump truck is costing me $300,000 now. So some of these things have doubled. So it makes it harder for the percentage to be smaller when you're seeing that kind of increase in your asset costs. So, and it's hard for me to understand how they could go up as much as they have. Like I said, the fire trucks are almost 300% what they were. And that seems insane to me.
Well, other than, extreme interest rates or inflation levels, I mean, you know how things like cost of living increases are tied to certain things. I don't know if we draft a standard to tie it to some other external number. And I see, Jane, did you have your hand up or a comment? You're muted, Jane.
Yeah, just regarding the fire trucks, that's actually private equity has bought up, apparatus manufacturers. And it's collusion. There's a bunch of lawsuits actually going on right now, suing these companies because they're driving it up way high artificially. So that is malfeasance. That is very bad for taxpayers. I will fight that. If that fight comes to our door, our manufacturer right now is not named, in one of those particular.
But I remember that was like Fidel had they wanted the retroactive 20% increase on the contract, or they were not going to deliver to us. And yeah,
that's right. And they've got every municipality in the country. That's a lot of cities and towns buying fire apparatus. It is, terrible how this has happened to the country. But that's a particular thing that is well beyond inflation, and we still have to be able to put out fires. So
I think anything that gives us flexibility is good, but we need barriers, because that's what the bond rating, they just don't want it to be too much flexibility, and then it's unpredictable. Are you going at 3%? Are you going at 7%? Depending on the range size, they need to have a.
And we tend to exercise our right to soften it when needed. Oh, sorry. We in the last few years have softened it and said, okay, let's do 4.5 instead of 5 or 4. But also coming out of the pandemic and the cost of everything was so high, we went to 5.5. So we're kind of flexing our policy as needed.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just not written down. Could it be possible?
It is written down. It is written down.
And we'll be flexible and we'll go to 5.5 or down?
Oh, no, we could write it into our policy,
Yeah,
but we
that's
do
all I'm
have a
talking
policy.
about.
Yeah.
Sharon, just so I have something for the next, when we get to future agendas, maybe I'm being dumb. Is there a place where we have these policies written? It's just under policies. Okay.
If you struggle to
very
find
easy.
anything, I can.
Yeah. Okay.
I definitely
I
think
I was trying to make it too hard, that it was.
Karen had
statement.
recommended that DLS goes out and helps municipalities update their policies or create policies if they don't have things written down. We have a lot of these things written down, but in some cases, they haven't been updated in recent years, so they need to be refreshed.
So these policies are similar to the policies where we name peer towns as well? Or is that part, I don't know if that.
Is that a policy? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting, I spent a while trying to do things about policies last year. And, Karen mentioned the forum we had with DLS and stuff like that. And yeah, one of the more interesting things I learned from that is that the state doesn't consider your peer community definition to be a policy. And we're like, we'd like to update ours. And they're like, we're not going to help you with that at all.
Oh, I just meant because we might roll it into our policies that
it's on,
okay.
It is, both are in the sidebar of the FinCom webpage, but one is policies, and then peer community benchmarking guidelines is its own thing.
And that's just not a requirement. We're just coming up with that? Because I know the
Yeah,
select
I mean,
board was.
I think,
Did we weren't going to pay money to a consultant to come up
We
with
paid
new.
a consultant to identify our peer communities, and I don't think we've done it in a lot of years. So I don't know if the communities that we use are still what
right.
we should consider our peers or not.
Yeah,
Oc-
and
October
I'm not
2013.
cool with paying consultants to do anything right
No,
now.
no,
Like,
me neither. But that, I mean, it seems to me like most of the communities that we compare ourselves to are similar size and similar, dynamic demographics and all of that. So, but some of them I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about this one, but most of them are.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I just wanted to thank Jane about suggesting this because it's one of the things that I'm always pro about using free cash for one-time items. Yeah, first of all, it creates a systematic approach about your capital plan. Also, if we had done this, let's say we went back in time and we did this, I think we probably might have had a lesser chance of going through an override right now. And I'll tell you why, because every time when you have the flexibility of pushing a capital item out to fund, for example, a quote unquote community priority, like let's say you need to hire, during COVID, a health director, for example, I'm just saying. If you have a policy in place that says you cannot use free cash to fund salary, to fund operational items, nobody would have thought of doing that. But we didn't have that. So I took that as an example, meaning that if you have a policy in place, you go by it, but buying one-time items with free cash that you don't actually know that you will have it the next year, it's the right approach, because also it gets you closer to what you have available to keep your house financially stable. And I really like that approach. But also I would like, if we go through a full-on policy development, which we can, I'd like to add some flexibility to that, because there is emergency situations that you should be able to use free cash. I can't think of any, but let's say there was a fire somewhere and you needed X amount of money that you cannot find it anywhere. There should be some type of clause there that you can use free cash for specific things, such as to avoid future debt. That's a great idea. Like if you have $10 million worth of free cash and you need to buy a truck, just buy the truck. Don't
Yeah, I
finance
was
it.
just looking at a policy that someone said, it has these one-time expenses and also like litigation settlements. I don't think that was the word, but like that's a one-time thing.
So that's why Jane is spot on about this policy. I think we should definitely look into it and kind of get it more formalized in terms of going in the weeds, getting into the details, what you can use it for, what are the things that you cannot use it for. I think that's where the discussion would be. And maybe we follow a hybrid approach. Maybe we say 1% of uncommitted cash can be used for operational expenses. Like we put like a small amount there, but having a systematic approach to it and not leaving it open to what the budget needs, I think it's a very strong financial and prudent financial discussion and policy that we should definitely look into.
Okay, so it sounds like I don't want to, maybe I'm just going to go slightly out of order here and before liaison assignments and get into future agendas, because it sounds like that's what we're just discussing. So I've been writing down, a policy discussion, and I feel like future might be, I don't think we're going to have another financial forum. I haven't looked at the schedule of meetings if we're going to have something like that before the override. But this is, we probably are. We do.
September, right?
Number of meetings.
September, okay.
September, yeah.
Sorry, it's getting late. So,
Saturday, 19th.
oh, but isn't that Saturday, the 19th?
The 16th.
This-
so
The 16th.
Financial forum in October, but we have some override forums in the interim.
Right. And the override forums are, FinCom, come if you can kind of things. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I think we're mixing up multiple things that are called forums. I think what Mary Ann is talking about is the fall financial forum that we've have every year. It's on, as Emily said, it's on the calendar for October 7th right now. And then and that does seem like, I don't know, I mean, that seems like a fine time to discuss policies, especially if we've already had 47 other forums in which we discussed the override. But the override forums, none of those are organized by us. That's out of our hands at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at this, I have the schedule up now. So, and we have budget meetings with this, so we're going to get right into the budget. So it's something that, you know, the vote is going to be what it is. We're going to be worn out talking about the override with all of the other forums. But yeah, maybe we could have part of this discussion it says the financial forum would be discussion on override and recommendations and guidance for the FY28 budget. And if we have people that are listening in on that, that is the time to introduce that we are going to, in the coming years, try to not necessarily tighten up policies, but maybe just standardize what the town is doing, whether it's I like your idea of a hybrid approach, giving us, and Karen's approach of flexibility. I think everything's so unpredictable now. We need to have flexibility in what we're going to do, and plus we don't know which way. If the override doesn't pass and we're going to a different override in the spring, we're going to need the ultimate flexibility. So those are future agenda topics. I think at the beginning of the meeting, I alluded to some members of the audit committee had mentioned a Burbank audit. I guess I'd want to be curious to say what is the information that we get from them. But if we were to discuss that, Sharon, is there a known cost of these kinds of audits, or is that something you or Jane can ask? Like,
I'd have to ask.
yeah,
you know,
it
get a
wouldn't cost
quote.
you money to ask. Someone would
No,
give you a
they
ball.
would probably give us a quote. We'd probably have, I don't know if we can use our actual firm. Like last time we had an audit like that, when we had the procurement audit, it wasn't done by our actual firm. So I don't know why we did that, but I think we had to maybe get quotes or
Yeah,
bids.
and we would still, I'm not saying we're going to do it, the FinCom would discuss that further. So it's not an
So off the top of my head, I don't even have an estimate for it.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what we're looking for, how involved such an audit would be.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just a question on that. So they are a charity, nonprofit, and they have to have audited financial statements and fill out the 990s. So that's publicly available.
Right.
So we're looking to do something in addition to that?
That was something that I'm not saying we're going to, that was requested by a couple of audit committee members to look into that, but I think we should start by looking at their financials, because I guess, when I've tried to look to how up to date are the financials online too, right?
Fiscal 25. I just checked
Yeah,
20
okay,
minutes ago.
good.
So, I mean, it's available. I didn't
So
know
we
if the
should start
discussion
with,
was.
we what's
either-
free.
Yeah. I didn't know if if it was known and we still want to do something more, which is a little aggressive in my opinion, but I wasn't at the meeting.
Yep, Andrew, you had a
I
question?
agree with Chris. Also, what was the cause of the request for an audit?
I don't know.
Karen could answer that.
Karen Herrick is on there, and that she and her, Stephen Herrick, were the audit committee members that were asking about that.
Yeah, this has been asked by the audit committee members before. So it's a little problematic to people in the financial world that the Burbank Ice Arena has their own accounting firm, and they've just gone through an acquisition. It was the same accounting firm, which was small and in Wakefield, who has been providing their certified audited financials. So there are, and there have been some areas that could be looked at to tighten up, like we've done on the town side, cash operations, policies and procedures, things like that. But I would agree with Mary Ann that, step one is just, look at the financials, and yeah. And our lease does give us this opportunity, and we have never done it, and we're not getting revenue from them, and we're in a revenue tight situation. But maybe an audit can also identify some ideas. The audit committee talked about, well, as far as the town goes, what areas do we want to look at and make sure things are tightened up?
We were going to look at the cash operations, like that was what came up.
So chain of command and making sure nothing that ever happened at the RMLD could happen in Burbank, things like that. So it doesn't have to be a big deal, and this is $1 million operation, so it's small.
Right, and it's, you know, everything is unique. It's not an apples to apples thing. So if I'm just looking ahead at meetings, I think maybe in our September 16th meeting, FinCom regular meeting, you know, maybe we can have an introduction to the policy topic with, I don't know, just going over what our policies now say. Are there any, what things do we want to revisit in the future? We'll kind of have a copy of the policies there, and maybe there's some easy things to update. I don't know, I'm just kind of winging it, that would be a meeting for that. Joseph, did you have a question? Or?
Yeah, Marianne, I'm just like Googling, you know, or whatever AI now, but like the DLS does have like, you know, different recommendations.
Right, that was what I read
policies.
earlier.
And you're talking about that might be a good starting.
Right, a
point.
good start, and maybe we could look at a couple of peer towns that have good bond ratings. Say, we'll look at the good peer towns and just see, do we have, because why reinvent the wheel, but what can we turn in our own flavor? So we could have wouldn't make any decisions, but maybe an introduction to that topic. We're gonna, and I don't know, I think the idea, we have a financial forum on the 7th, voting on recommendation guidance for the FY28 budget. I feel like that's going to be very hard to do without knowing how the override passes. We're going to have some contingent votes with that. And then there'll be warrant articles coming up, and the select board closes those by the end of September. So I'm not going to change that. And then we get like right into, you know, the override and town meeting and budget season. So we kind of have one meeting, September 16th, to maybe, I'll see if I can, maybe we can just get costs on if we wanted to undertake any other audits, and maybe that isn't something we can do right now, but we can say, well, like Chris said, there's public information. So the kind of the two topics there can be an overview of looking at our policies and audits, because really, you know, we're empowered by the charter to audit things that, if there's a concern, or, you know, and we don't know if there's a concern, we don't like that, you know, we're not getting maybe the revenue we wish we were getting from Burbank, but we don't know if there's a concern. Joe, you have your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, please finish your sentence.
No, that's
Finish
fine.
the thought. I'm not trying to
kind of
interrupt.
just getting it, like, just,
Yeah.
okay, those two topics, I'm getting ready to move on to liaison assignments, so.
Sure. So on the subject of sort of, as you're thinking through the timeline here, are we trying to agree as a committee on any policy updates before the override?
No, just the idea of, we're going to, you know, like like the schools update the handbook, okay, this is outdated and we need to plan in the coming year to, maybe that's not a good analogy. Like, we're going to talk about what we're going to plan to change. We've talked about things, but we have to look at what policies we have, what policies would need to be changed, and then have a plan to how to change them. We can't change anything before the override.
I could have the policies we have, and then also maybe print up the templates that DLS provides for those same policies and see what we can extract from the template that maybe isn't incorporated into our current policy. That's what I was thinking we could be having.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Go ahead, Andrew.
I just wanted to add, and maybe we revisit the percentages that we have. That's what I was thinking when I was talking about
Percentage of free cash, you
Yeah.
mean, like,
Yeah, the number, we have it like at
I'm sorry?
7%. The numbers, we should revisit it, and, because that number has been unchanged for how long now, Sharon?
the 7% number, you mean?
Oh, the percentage of reserves, it's been the same for a long time. I think I
August
started, it was
2018.
5, and we
2018,
increased
so
it to 7. It's been 7 for a long, long time.
It's probably time to
It was
have
back
it
when-
for discussion.
It was back when 10% was considered sufficient reserves, and now they want 15 to 20, so we haven't changed.
I mean, it would be hard to, if you think about, okay, if we all said, yeah, let's go to 15 to 20, and we have this override, and then the money won't even go to the operating costs.
I wouldn't
it'll
expect
go
that.
sticking in reserves.
But the fact that we haven't moved that minimum reserve at all from the 7%, that might be something we might want to, maybe not go to a high number, but just start to make progress in the right direction.
So just discuss it, that's all.
Okay. Go ahead, Emily.
You have Chris with a hand.
I'm sorry, so Chris Haley, you have your hand up? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. I just want to mention that I was previously on the audit committee for the last, I don't know, 2, 3 years or whatever. And I just want to clarify that a member, singular, has previously requested that the Burbank thing be audited. And then my other question / comment is that the discussion tonight is regarding the override because we don't have any money, correct? I mean, this might be a dumb question, but you are literally now discussing about potentially doing an audit on somebody that is already audited and incurring another fee. So I'm just wondering how that's going to be presented to the public that, there's been criticism of us mismanaging money in general, and now we want to go ahead and spend more money to audit the Burbank Ice Arena.
We're going to talk about the fact of it and whether we need it, whether we need it or not, that we're going to do it, and here's the timeline. I think it just wasn't on our agenda tonight, so I've introduced the topic that we'll discuss it in the future, and for the very reasons you're giving us, we may just say, this ain't the time,
I would think that if I know a prior recommendation was, I think Andrew mentioned about writing stuff on the ballot and presenting it certain ways. I think that we should have in very bold letters that part of this money for the override will be used to audit the Burbank Ice Arena. This way here, everybody is crystal clear on the position.
It's too late to change the ballot question, Chris.
Yes, that is what I would like to have on there. Big red letters too, in bold. That's what we should really be focusing on during override talks.
I think that not that, but the fact of auditing the cash operations, like with DPW, and I don't know if we talked about the Pleasant Street Center. We may find things out with
They don't
even
take
just
cash anymore.
Yeah, I know. Much to the chagrin of the seniors, I know that. Go ahead, Mark.
So at the audit committee meeting, it was pretty unanimous that this doesn't fall under the audit committee. It should be discussed at the FinCom. So that's why it's being mentioned now. Not that any members wanted to have an audit, but it was like let FinCom, present it to FinCom and let FinCom make a recommendation.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
So it's not, we're going to go ahead and do this. It's far from that. So it was just, bring it up at the FinCom and let them make a recommendation or not. So that was the discussion at the audit committee.
Okay, so I think we've exhausted future agendas because there's still a lot. Everything's going to kind of hinge on the election, a lot of our direction. So liaison assignments. Jackie, could you put that up on the screen? Some of us have packets printed out, but everyone can see. So John Sullivan couldn't be here. He indicated he's happy with his assignments. Obviously, did you plug in Chris Cook where Jeffrey Coram was? Chris, are you okay with those selections, or do you have?
Yeah, it seems fair.
And I think for me, there's no more charter review committee because the charter was changed, and I don't think the committee exists. And now I get added to audit committee in the place of whoever the chair is. But I didn't want to take on too much else. I think select board, audit committee, and I guess Conservation Commission, not that much is happening there. Does anyone have any changes or anything?
So I'd like to point out that I literally don't have any liaison assignments anymore.
Oh.
My only assignments were the CPA study committee that sunset and the audit committee where I was the ex officio representative as chair.
Okay, so what do you want?
I mean, what's up for grabs?
Take the school committee from me.
I could do school committee.
What's your passion?
I mean, it's all important. I mean, select board is important. The school committee is important. I do like conservation. Obviously, I was on Conscom.
You can have it. You can have it.
It's also Conscom's also a pretty light lift because they, don't because they don't have any money, so they have very little to discuss with us.
Well, then I'm fine with taking that down. I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, we
sometimes
can leave
I
it on
follow
there.
the library stuff, but who else is who's the library person here? Joe. We don't need more than one library person. No.
I mean, I go to the, like, our
What about-
on the board, there's not a lot happening financially, like, so.
I'm trying to think of, we have a new disabilities commission, and I know one person on it, but I don't know that incurs anything financial. Okay, so no changes from anyone else?
Emily, what's happening with you with, like the rec was, you still want to do that? Or
I was saying, I've still been going to all the rec and all the COA meetings for other reasons, so I'm happy to keep reporting out on.
Oh, so you could be, yeah, we don't have I was thinking about COA, we don't have a COA here.
Yeah, I've been kind of doing it under the community services bucket a little bit, because that's my department, but I go to all of Jenna's meetings, basically.
Might get public safety, because I've got two that are gonna go away.
All right, so Mark Zarro would also add public safety, because what's going away, public services recreation?
Yeah, and the school committee.
School committee, okay. So for school committee, then we have John Sullivan and Chris Cook?
You mean Joe Carnahan and Chris Cook?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Joe Carnahan. Well, John Sullivan, no, yeah, you're right. He doesn't have that. I was thinking he had that because sometimes he reports on it. So he's got public services, community development, permanent building committee recal is still in business. Eastern Gateway Steering Committee, definitely need someone there. Who does CPDC here?
John's been doing that under Public Service Community Services.
Okay.
So he's been doing, he's doing all the zoning stuff. So Eastern Gateway, CPDC.
Madam Chair, if I suggest, I don't mind, if you want to add something, I don't mind being liaison to the Commissioner on Trust Funds, just to see.
Oh, yeah, 'cause
just to
you were
get
on
involved.
that.
I was on it, and there's a lot of money there that people are trying to spend.
Well, I guess if I'm just on select board and audit committee, I feel like, well, then being the chair is a load too. I don't know. I feel like there should be something else. But what board are we missing? I should look at like the list of boards and committees, right? Or who's under? Maybe we don't have to just create work for work. I mean, there's bylaw committee, but that doesn't really impact finances. I know they're doing a snow shoveling thing, but.
We don't have a liaison to Board of Health, but I don't know, I mean, they spend more money than the bylaw committee does, which is to say any at all.
Okay, I guess,
But I mean, that's.
they don't conflict. I think they meet on Thursday nights. They don't conflict with us. They don't meet that often. Town forest trails. I'm just looking. ZBA, that doesn't impact our money.
Housing Authority?
So you could do the Housing Authority and Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I've seen the Affordable Housing Trust Fund have a lot of meetings recently, so that involves money, I guess.
Okay, I guess I'll put me down for that. It's not Board of Health, but Affordable Housing and Housing Authority. Probably good to know what they're doing anyway. And I think if there's nothing more on liaison assignments, and we talked about future agendas, we are now at the prior minutes. And we have quite a few minutes here, but we should be able.
Motion to approve the minutes from the May 20th, 2026 Finance Committee as presented.
Second.
Okay, and so I think we don't have anybody online, so does everyone, I'm sorry, I'm like not thinking here. Vote on the motion, show of hands?
I'm just going to abstain because I wasn't there.
Yep. Okay, so that would be 7 and 0 and 1. 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah, 6, 0 and 1. Sorry, I forgot about John.
If you want to move the next 2 minutes together, because I was here, so.
Motion to approve the June 25th, 2026 Finance Committee meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, and a show of hands on the motion. That's good. And I think we have one more.
Motion to approve the July 15th, 2026 Finance Committee meeting minutes as presented.
Second.
Okay, all approve? Excellent. And,
Motion to adjourn.
okay, another show of hands? Thank you. We are adjourned.